Hello and welcome to the Esoteric Order of Gamers. My name is Peter and today I'm going to give you a very quick, very personal review of The Lord of the Rings, Fate of the Fellowship. I'm going to sell it after just 2 plays, so stay tuned. So before we get started, of course, I've created a rules summary and reference for Fate of the Fellowship. Here are all the rules on 2 sides of 1 sheet, and then you can find in the set a little player reference card as well. It's single-sided. It's everything you need for a player to refer to during a game. It's really handy. Go along to my website at orderofgamers.com and download the PDF, print it out, laminate it, stick it in your box. Also, you'll find it on my app, Tabletop Codex, which is my fantastic rules summary and reference app. And it's super easy to use and really handy during a game. You can search for rules and you can find out answers to your questions during the game. Check them both out. You can download that one for free, and you can download Tabletop Codex from the Google Store or Apple Play Store. So let's get on to Fate of the Fellowship. Here it is all set up, and what you've got here basically is a variation on the pandemic system, and it says it's a pandemic system game on the rulebook here. There's a little thing, pandemic system. And at first I thought from reviews that it'd be quite different from pandemic, and it is, but it does share a lot of similarities as well. And that is mainly that you're going to be getting into a deck of cards, and after a certain number of these cards are played, they're going to be shuffled and put back on the top of the deck. So you're going to see recurring threats appear over and over in the game. That ramps up the tension. Also, you can control the amount of difficulty in the game by how many of these Skies Darkened cards get shuffled in throughout the draw deck. The board is set up with a number of troops, and there are little icons on the board telling you how many troops go in various areas. They're tiny, tiny little meeples, and they'll be moving around the board, of course, as you play. Now, once you've set up the basic setup of troops, you'll also draw some extra cards, and depending what those locations are on the cards, you'll be putting down another 9 troops. So there's a slightly random setup to the number of troops that go on the board. You've also got the Eye of Sauron, which starts looking at Eriador, up where the Shire is, and there's several Nazgul miniatures scattered around the board. Several. What am I saying? Several. There's 9, of course. 9 Nazgul. There's a lot of variability in the game in that you have a number of scenarios for the setup. Frodo and Sam always have to go to Mount Doom and drop the ring in the Crack of Doom, but before that there'll be other objectives you have to complete before Frodo does that final mission. There's a whole bunch of them here. You could mix and match your own ones, or you can use one of the suggested scenarios that come in the book. They come in different levels of difficulty. So you'll be starting off, for example, with just 3 scenarios before the main one of chucking in the ring. And then later on you can go to 4 scenarios, and they're quite themed. So one, for example, may concentrate on what's going on in Rohan, or another one may concentrate on what's going on in Gondor. But no matter your objective setup, that last one is always going to be destroying the one ring. The other thing that's variable are the characters that you use. Each player has to have 2 characters. Someone always has to have Frodo and Sam, which count as 1 character. But there are all other characters from the books and the films, of course, all the ones you know and love, and they all have different special abilities described on these cards. You also get a few of these region cards. As I said before, you're going to have these Skies Darkened cards are going to be shuffled in there. They're the equivalent of sort of spreading the disease in pandemic. They amp up the difficulty. These region cards have icons on them, and these icons can be used to do various things. For example, you'll need these sneak icons if you want to move Frodo through areas where the Nazgul or Shadow troops are without rolling a search test. There's also friendship icons, and they're used for mustering troops in friendly regions. The Valor tokens are used for when you want to capture a Shadow stronghold and turn it into a haven. And they can also be used for extra rerolls when you're in combat. The ring icon is also used for rerolls in combat, but you need 5 of them to complete the Destroy the One Ring mission at the end of the game. One interesting thing is that when you take your turn, you take 4 actions with one of your characters and just 1 with the other. And this is really nice because it changes your focus on the board. You can focus on one character and the other one is sort of in a holding pattern, and then you can swap that focus the next time you have a turn. And these are the actions that you can take. You can travel, which is move to a connected location along these travel lines on the board. As I mentioned before, when Frodo moves into a region where there are Nazgul and Shadow troops, he'll have to roll a search unless he spends one of those stealth icons. There's a fellowship action. If you're in a region with another character, you can give or take a region card that matches the region you're in. The prepare action allows you to swap your region cards for tokens with the same matching symbols on them. And you'll want to do this because your hand limit of cards is only 7. So this allows you to store more of those icons for use during the game and still keep to your hand limit. If you're at one of the marked locations of the Free Peoples, you can exchange a friendship icon to muster a troop from that nation at that location. If there's a location where there are friendly troops and shadow troops, you can attack them. And if you're at a shadow location where there are just friendly troops and no shadow troops, you can spend 3 valor tokens to turn it into a haven. And that means the shadow won't be able to recruit more shadow troops at that location. After you've done your actions, you can draw 2 more region cards to add to your hand. And then finally, you have to resolve a number of shadow cards equal to where the threat token is on the threat track. So for example, if it's on this space here, there's a 3 underneath there, and you have to, one at a time, resolve these shadow cards. Now there's a clever little trick here in that when you draw the card, you put it next to the draw deck in this resolve section. And then depending on the side of the card that's on the top of the deck, you resolve either the top or the bottom of the card. So for example, if we have these 2 cards together, you'll be resolving the bottom here because the icon is down here. If, however, the symbol on the top of the deck is this card, you'll be resolving the top of the card. Now, the tops of the cards are always travel instructions, and this moves the shadow troops around the board along these coloured movement tracks. The bottom actions are recruiting troops for the shadow player in various areas, and also usually moving either the Eye of Sauron or Nazgul to Frodo's location. Oh, I should also point out that in the region cards, there are some event cards as well. They're shuffled in at the start of the game and they spice things up a bit. So that's basically it. It's pretty straightforward. There are, of course, some special abilities on all the character cards, and there's a certain amount of bookkeeping, but the basic rules are pretty straightforward. You win the game if you complete all your objectives and then that final one of destroying the One Ring. You lose the game if you lose all hope. There's a hope track over here, and various things reduce hope. Like, for example, Free People's strongholds. I'm using the terminology from War of the Ring there because I know that game so well. But Free People's locations, if they get captured by the shadow, you lose 3 hope. If you get down to 0 hope, you immediately lose the game. Now, I mentioned you have to make search rolls if Frodo moves into a location with Nazgul and shadow troops. That involves rolling some of these black dice, and these symbols may make you lose hope or move the Nazgul. When you're attacking, of course, you roll attack dice. You may lose shadow troops, you may lose friendly troops. It may be dependent on whether the Nazgul are in the same location or whether your troops are in a haven. And of course, every time you roll dice, you'll be chucking them down this large, elaborate dice tower. Okay, that's a super basic overview of the rules. Let's get straight on to what I personally think of Fate of the Fellowship. Well, folks, I said at the start of this game that I'd be selling it after just 2 plays. And you're probably thinking, well, that's not enough plays to do a review. And that's why I wanted to keep this review pretty short, because it is a very personal review. This is a good game, and there's a lot to it. And if you enjoy cooperative games in the vein of Pandemic, I think you'll really enjoy this. If, of course, you like the theme as well. The reason I'm not keeping it is because I'm not too crazy about co-op games, and I'm particularly not too crazy about the Pandemic system of co-op games. And that is, basically, it all comes down to one thing. There's a lot of busy work, which I find distracting from the game. Basically, at the end of every player turn, you have to resolve a number of these shadow cards. And when you resolve them, it's a very clever system in that the top of the deck dictates whether you use the top or the bottom of the card. Because after a certain number of these cards, well, after you draw one of these Skies Darkened cards, a bunch of these in the discards are going to get shuffled and put back on the top of the deck. It could easily be predictable and you'd know which cards are going to happen next. But because of the top of the deck mechanism, you don't exactly know what's going to happen. That's very, very clever. The problem is that you have to do this at the end of every turn, and it usually, most of the time, involves moving shadow troops around the board. And to do that, you have to look at the start and the end location that is described on the card, look at the colour of the arrow, find that arrow on the board, and then usually sort of, because you're going from troops at the end of that arrow back to the start of that arrow, you start from the destination, you work your way back along the arrow, and you move any troops along that line to the next location along the line. So you have a little conga line of troops. They push each other along until they get to the location and attack it. It's a very clever system and it works well. I'm not saying it doesn't work well, but I just find it tedious to have to do this at the end of every turn. The other problem I have is one that a lot of people don't seem to have, and that is I just don't enjoy cooperative games very much. As you might know, my favourite game of all time is War of the Ring, and I just love the competitive nature of that game and the secrecy on either side and the aha moments and all these wonderful things that I just don't feel you get in a cooperative game. There's something to me very dissatisfying about winning and losing cooperative games. When you win them, you can go, yay, I beat the game system. To me, it's not the same as beating an opponent that you've been playing with face to face, enjoying all the interactions. Cooperating to beat a game is something that I think probably works well in story games. I've got a lot of big adventure story games where you can work together to complete a story. That's okay. But in a game like this, and this may be just because I played so much of War of the Ring, as a cooperative game, it just falls flat for me. I played twice and I just thought, that's good, but I personally don't want to play it again. I'm going to put it on the sell pile. Now, I know this has had a lot of really good reviews, and I'm sure there are people who are absolutely screaming at me right now and saying, oh, you've just touched the surface, you haven't given it what it deserves, the time that it deserves, and I completely and utterly understand that and agree with them. I'm just saying that the fiddliness of moving the troops around, the maintenance of the system that gives you the opponent in this game, the imaginary opponent, is very distracting from the game experience itself. I very much prefer to concentrate on playing my turn and playing the game rather than having to go through this process all the time. And quite understandably, there is a process to keep the gears of the system that you're fighting against turning. And it's very clever and it works very well. But I don't like resolving that process every single turn because it takes me away from the enjoyment of the game. Now, there's some nice moments here. You're pretty much following, of course, the story beats of The Lord of the Rings, and certainly going into this game without a knowledge of The Lord of the Rings, you'd find it very confusing indeed. But the story beats are nice. Sometimes strange things happen. You'll have Eowyn going up to Woodland Realm to muster troops and defend against the Shadow. They're kind of interesting, but they don't feel quite as real as the kind of moments you get in War of the Ring. And I shouldn't compare those two games. These two games, they're very, very different. But in War of the Ring, it really does feel like Lord of the Rings. This one kind of feels like there are moments that just sort of threw me out of the theme a little bit. There are some practical problems with the game, and that is the board is too small for what's going on, really, I think. Seems to be a curse of lots of Lord of the Rings games. At one stage, I had all of these Nazgul, all 9 Nazgul packed in there, plus troops. As you can see, there's just not enough room in that space. And then when you're moving the troops around and trying to get them under the bases of the Nazgul, these are lovely and they give a nice bit of verticalness to the whole experience, but I think probably counters would have been better for the Nazgul. The board itself is just a riot of colours. I know they've got to have these different coloured movement paths, but it feels very, very busy and a big sort of visual soup and not very attractive to look at. I'm not too crazy about the typography, and I mentioned this in my unboxing actually. I mentioned that they were using this font, a 70s font called Benguat. And then I realised, of course, after I'd filmed that these ideas that I grew up with in my career that I understood as a designer, saying, oh, that looks like a 70s font, those things don't necessarily hold true anymore. People don't look at this font and instantly think 70s unless they have an awareness that that was a 70s font in the first place and it appeared a lot during the 70s. If you're younger and you have no connection to the 70s beyond what you see on TV or whatever, then obviously it's just a font. So I can't knock that too much, but I can knock things like having that font and then having Middle-earth written on the board in a medieval Germanic black letter font. That does not work, and it doesn't go with the other fonts. It's all just a bit of a messy soup. Also, these objective cards as well are kind of unattractive. You don't really use these icons here. I think there could have been some better way to express this information. Here's another design choice that always frustrates me, enlarging the first letter of each word in a title. This means that the letter gets bigger and bolder than the rest of the word. You need a special font to do this kind of thing, and just enlarging the letter doesn't work. Hate to be critical on that front, but I've been a graphic designer my entire life and I notice these things. To other people they may not make any difference, but to me they do make a difference. Talking about visuals, of course, you have this spectacular dice tower, this spectacularly unnecessary dice tower. Look, it looks beautiful. I blacklined it as well. That made it look even better. It's a lovely thing and it makes a nice noise when you roll the dice down it, but it's completely unnecessary. And it does feel like it's sort of padding out the game a bit just to get it to a slightly higher price point. It's kind of an unnecessary extra, but I suppose it's something that gives the game some presence, especially in marketing. So there you go. Love it or hate it, Dice Tower. So there you go, folks. Lord of the Rings, Fate of the Fellowship. Unfortunately, a swing and a miss for me. I wasn't enamored of it. I played it a couple of times, and while I appreciate the way the system works and how well it works, and I realize there's a lot of replayability with the different scenarios, it just wasn't the kind of thing that excited me. However, a lot of people will enjoy it because I know Pandemic is hugely popular and the Pandemic spin-offs are hugely popular. So as I said, this is a very personal review and it's just my opinion, and your opinion may definitely vary in this particular case. Thank you very much for watching, folks. I will see you next time. Don't forget to download my rules and reference and check out my app, Tabletop Codex, and good gaming.